Hello, everyone. Welcome to Kryptonize. Joining me today is Levi, and he's with Invone, and we're going to talk all sorts of things, not just about what he's doing, but what his experiences with the SEC and security tokens. It's going to be a debate. It's going to be fun. But before we jump in, Levi, why don't you give us a little background on yourself?
So I am Levi Brackman. Thank you so much for inviting me here, Mark. Really an honor to be on your program. I'm really grateful. My background, well, the first thing I ever did was I was a rabbi. So I've got a lot of books behind me. That was my first career, if you like. And I
Okay.
still love studying the Talmud and philosophy, etc. So, and I do that very regularly, daily, actually. But I'm no longer practicing as a rabbi. Now I am the CEO and founder of a company called Invone, and we are a crowdfunding platform. So we are, if you like, a primary issuance platform where
Hmm.
people can issue securities on our platform to the regular public.
Are you familiar with Jonathan Medved?
I've heard of him.
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
he a radio guy?
He's also he's in Israel, and
Oh yes.
he does something called Our Crowd, and but he doesn't do the crowdfunding aspect of it. He basically does it the old school way, which is very effective. And I'm just curious if you guys have run into each other because you're doing similar things.
Well, I had heard his name. I think he's a 506c guy, and so you're accredited investor kind of person. And the difference between my platform and what he's doing is that we are just the everyman platform.
Speaking of every man that's watching this is going to be interested in this next section, and that is, tell us your experience with the SEC. Why you had to go them. Walk us through why you went to them, what project you had, and where you finally ended up after an exhausting set of discussions with them.
So my idea in the very beginning when I first founded Invone was that I thought that if we could allow homeowners to offer a piece of their equity to the investing public, that would be amazing. So we could open up this asset class called home equity to everybody, peer to peer, right? So I have, $500,000 of net worth in my home. I want to be able to get some money out of that. There's, John and Paul and Menachem and Chaim, they're down the road, and they want to invest in it, and they want to buy some of my equity. They can come on the platform and buy it, and that's what I wanted to do. So I started going down the route of becoming a crowdfunding portal that people could crowdfund their equity on my platform. And I quickly ran into some blockers associated with the law of securities law. And we went to FINRA, and FINRA eventually told us, hey, there's reasons why we think this might be problematic. You have to go to the SEC. So we started going to the SEC, and we had conversations with the SEC. And I thought, and our attorneys at the time thought, that we had an ironclad kind of argument why the law really supported our position. And we had one meeting with the SEC, and they were like, no, that's not what the law says. And we went back and we tried to argue it, and they're like, but the law doesn't say that. And they have a very simplistic reading of the law. This is what the law says. That's what it is. And what I walked away with, and what I realized, that these are people who read the law, and they're not reading it with any kind of ingenuity or any kind of way to figure out how maybe the law doesn't apply to you. They actually have a very broad reading of every law. And if you fall under their broad reading of the law in that category, it's just like we just don't think you can do it.
These are just bureaucrats interpreting what Congress intended 90 years ago, is it not?
Yeah, well, these were like more recent crowdfunding laws that I was talking about, right? It was talking about I'll give you one of the examples, and this is going to get very boring for people very quickly. So I'm going to get very quick. And what it was basically, it's whether we can actually hold securities. So we were saying, look, we're going to manage this process. You're a homeowner, right? You've got investors investing in it. We're going to have a company which manages that process, right? So the homeowner, we're not going to own any of the securities. The securities are going to be owned by the investor. The homeowner is going to have an investment. But if something goes wrong, we're going to manage that process. And obviously for a fee, etc. They said, well, that is managing securities. And we're like, no, we're not managing securities. And a funding portal, which is what we are, we're not allowed to manage securities. And then we try to argue, well, it's not us managing securities. It's an administrative thing. And they're like, no, that's managing securities. And And I understand their perspective. I just don't necessarily have that reading, but they have a very simplistic reading. If you're managing the process of securities, you're managing the securities. And that's how they saw it. And I tried to say, no, well, hedge fund manages securities for investors. That's not what we're doing. But, it was very difficult to kind of make that argument because they have a very simplistic and broad reading of the law.
Levi, why aren't realtors need security licenses then? They're managing securities as they're going through them selling the house. I don't understand what the SEC.
Well, they're not. That's not considered a security. So we can get into what the Howey rules are. These are definitely, a house is not considered a security ever, unless it's put into an LLC and it's fractionalized, etc. Then it's considered a security. But you would never argue that a house itself is a security. A house is an asset. It's a physical asset, right?
If I sell bits and pieces of my house,
If if you're all on title, it's not a security. If you put it into an LLC or some other entity, and then you sell pieces of that entity or pieces of that contract, and the expectation of profit about that is going to come about of the efforts of other people based on the Howey test, then it's a security. So no one was saying that, everyone agreed that we had securities here. The question was, is us managing the process here considered us managing securities or not? We said no. They said, I don't know, it seems like it is.
and of course, as you've seen with Ripple, you don't want to get into a $200 million lawsuit with these people. That you can't beat them unless you've got a big army or you have a bunch of congressmen that are willing to hold them up like they did Gensler at congressional hearing and embarrass him. So that's, I guess that's your issue, is that you got to go along with whatever they say. And this is the problem I have with them, is that they're not judges. They're not even supposed to interpret the law. They could create regulation around it, but it doesn't mean it's right. It doesn't mean it's legal.
No, and it might be wrong, but the question is, like, can we afford to actually take it to court and argue our point and then have a judge? It's a bit like what's going on with the debt ceiling. Use the 14th Amendment, right? That's the argument. Well, some people say that you can use it and it allows them to suspend the debt ceiling without Congress. Other people say not. It will be adjudicated by a judge if someone uses it, and they might lose. And meanwhile, what might happen? At that point, the whole economy might go to hell in a handbag while that's going on. So, in other words, like, when you have this disagreement with regard to a law, which is really, paramount in your business, you don't want to take on that business risk associated with having it go to be adjudicated by court, because if you lose, your business is kaput. And that's what we realized. I realized that actually this isn't viable because the SEC has an opinion here. Very clear, they were very clear to us in this meeting that this would be considered, as far as they were concerned, as you managing securities. We had the opinion, and my attorneys had the opinion, that's not the case. But the only way we could win that was going to court. And if we lost, our business is kaput. So it just wasn't worth it.
I know, but they use that, and they know that you'll give up, or even if you fight, that they'll just wear you down over time. I know the legal system pretty well, and that's what they're counting on. And it's really unfortunate that they adopt these hardline standards and they don't put out clear guidelines. They should have issued, here's our guidelines on something similar to this, because there's plenty of views out there. Eventually, they're going to try and do the same thing. Maybe not with houses, but it could be with cars or art or whatever.
It just was an eye opener to me about how they operate. In other words, they don't have this view of like, hey, let's look at the nuance. They're not looking at the nuance. They're looking at what the law says. And if it looks like you're doing something in line with what the law looks like, that's how they're going to read it. If you want to argue something novel, you can go ahead, but you're going to have to take that to court.
Yeah, but they're not operating transparently either. So how can justice be done when they're not operating transparently to see how they're making these decisions? They just issued you a decision, I don't know if it was verbal or written, without walking you through the process of why they issued it. So there's no way you can legally attack it. That's why they do it, because if they don't publish and they don't promote how they go about figuring these things out, you can't then take them to court and say, see, this is where they got it wrong at this point. You saw the congressional hearing with Gensler. You've heard from a bunch of crypto people. You've heard from crypto ETFs that have tried to get, their ETFs done. They don't. You've heard from Coinbase. They've tried to meet with them. Ripple, the same thing. These guys aren't meeting with them.
Yeah.
I don't know what you have, some special magic card. Maybe it's your rabbi card that you threw at them. I don't know,
Yeah,
but they're not doing it, and that's really the issue. Now, I mean, they're understaffed clearly, but if you
yeah.
just put out the guidelines for each of these scenarios, how many can there be, and then people can pick apart, if there's a legal problem with some of the ways they're devising the schema around whether something's a utility token or a security token. Like for me, XRP is clearly a utility token. There's no doubt. So what that other people have a perception that XRP is going to go up in value? The intent of XRP is to help money being transferred all the way around the world. Because then if I have a perception of anything that is going to go up in value and it's on me, the company wasn't promoting that, then everything could or could not be. It's almost like quantum physics. Maybe you see it as a security, maybe you don't, depending on where you are. And to me, this is crazy. They should just put out clear guidelines and that's it.
So look, I'll say two things to that. First of all, my experience with them was not the same as Coinbase and these other companies.
Well, you're lucky to have had an experience, from what I could tell.
Yeah, but I think the key was that I came to them before I started doing it. Right. In other words, I didn't look. I was involved with crypto, and not personally involved, but when I first started out, I was meeting with VCs, and they were like, just you should do this on blockchain. I met with like really high level people in the crypto world because they wanted to convince me to put what we were doing on the blockchain. I decided not to do it, but the point is that the way people were operating back then was, we'll do first and ask forgiveness later. That was their point of view. And that is what a lot of people did, because they said, we're going to conclude that this is not a security. And then if the SEC get upset and get the knickers in a twist about it, we'll ask for forgiveness later. That was their point of view. And you don't do that with the federal government, right? I mean, I guess you can try. But I think the SEC is a branch of the federal government, right? This is a very large ship, and it moves very slowly, and it's very hard to manipulate it. But when it moves, you better not be in its way. And that's exactly what I kind of said. Like, I need to kind of not take the approach of, because this is as extensional to the business I'm building, and I intend to build a business maybe more slowly than others, but one which is going to stand the test of time and is going to be around for a very long time. I need to do it properly and in accordance with the law, and have a good relationship with all these regulators and the agency, which basically writes the regulations and laws around it.
I think, though, that it is a big ship. It is slow moving, but we're going to hit a few icebergs here because everything's going overseas because there's no clarity, and nobody wants to operate in an environment where there's no clarity, where Wells notices are being sent to some crypto companies, not to Ethereum.
I would argue there is clarity, though, Mark. In other words,
I
see clarity that this is. I see the exact opposite clarity than you see.
I look. Here's what I did, and you know this because we've had the discussion. I pivoted to security tokens because I'm like, if they're just going to call them security tokens, I might as well head that direction because that's what they're going to do, and then who's going to fight them? I mean, even if Ripple wins, that's going to be a one-off. It's not going to be applied to all crypto. And then Coinbase and all the rest of it. It's just going to be a huge legal fight that's going to take years and years to fix. Whereas you could just do security tokens, or what you do, where it already is a legal path that has already been tried and true, and you just go that direction. It's not that much harder than just issuing crypto tokens. In some cases, it's easier because you're following a template. So I want to pivot to what you do, Levi, on your platform. And just give us a brief intro as to what it is. I like analogies, and let's start with that.
So it's really simple. Like, instead of doing a initial coin offering, which people did, actually you could still do initial coin offering. And this is the thing. Like, I don't think the SEC really cares that much what database you use in order to actually record where the security is actually, where it's recorded. Whether it's a Postgres database, SQL Server, or whether it's some kind of distributed ledger technology, that doesn't really matter. It's the concept of what they really want to make sure is that no fraud is happening here. So us as a funding portal, our responsibility is to do due diligence on the issuer and to make sure there's no fraud. So if you want to issue tokens, call them tokens. I call them securities, but call them tokens if you want.
NFTs.
Yeah, whatever you want to call them.
Right,
But if you
right.
want to issue them, you can do that legally. Come to us on Invone. We are the least expensive in the industry, less expensive by far than anybody else.
Then WeFunder, then Start Engine.
By far, right? They're like 8% cost of investor capital that you have raised. We're as little as 1.5%. So we're far and away the least expensive, and for very good reason, because we just think that kind of model is broken. We think, but if you want to issue them and you have the ability to bring your own community to bear to buy them, then you can do them on Invone. We don't mind how you're going to record it. If you want to record it on the blockchain versus record it on some other kind of, you know, it could be an Excel spreadsheet, whatever you want to do, it's fine. But you can issue them legally using a regulation crowdfunding or a 506c or Reg A if you want to the public and have them buy it. And now you are issuing securities.
So you're more like a do-it-yourself solution. You don't have the big fees that the WeFunders, Start Engines have. So you just facilitate a process that normally you'd have to spend a lot of money with legal fees and legal structures and attorneys that are unscrupulous. I know the good ones, unscrupulous that just reuse their own templates, that they've already built and charge somebody else, and they charge you the same amount. So that's kind of the benefit for going your direction. What you're saying is that, but there's a catch. You need to bring your own community, your own marketing. We're doing all the back end heavy lifting. You bring the marketing and the community.
Thing is, Mark, that the dirty little secret is that if you go to WeFunder, you go to Start Engine, you go to Republic, you need to bring your own community as well. That's just the reality of it. And the meeting beforehand was with a marketing company which has worked with all those platforms, and he said the same thing. That there is no platform where you can put up a deal and automatically gets funded unless you have your own community to bear and you do your own marketing. It won't succeed. So, Kickstarter as well. They take a whole bunch of money. Why should they take so much money? You're bringing your community to their platform. I think it's a fundamentally broken. The cost of commission on money raised as the primary driver for fees for any kind of crowdfunding is a broken model, and we intend to change that and so make it a lot less expensive, and you pay only what you use. And then we don't, if you are really successful at fundraising a lot of money, that doesn't mean that you should be penalized by paying a huge amount of money to my platform.
Wonderful. And where do they go to get started if they're interested?
Invone.com, INVOWN, stands for invest and own. So it's two-sided. You've got the investors and you've got the owners of the companies on each side, Invone.com. And, so everything's there. Our pricing is not opaque. It's published on the website. It's there. You know what you're going to be charged, and we'll help you with the legal documents. We'll help you strategize about how to structure your deal. We'll spend time with you. We are a little bit careful. We don't take on everybody because we like to spend time with all of our clients to make sure they get it right. So we're not huge, therefore we can't take on everybody. But those who we take on, will really help you get it right.
Excellent. Well, great talking to you. I especially like our discussion about the SEC and your experience and my experience with them. So with that, I'd love to have you back on for another episode. I was just thinking as we were going through this, totally unrelated to what we talked about today, but more futuristic. But I'll get in touch with you separately on that. All right. Thank you very much. And
thank you, Mark.
Until next time.
Hello, Kryptonize fans. I've got a token for you. We've had a lot of tokens come on the show. Some we like, some we don't. But we really like Tetragard. Why? Because it is a wrapped coin with PAX-G, with Ethereum, Bitcoin, and this rewards token called Quadrant. So you get it all wrapped up in kind of a one-click buy at the website below, and if you hold on to it, you get rewards that you could sell back to the Ethereum blockchain and get more Ethereum just for holding what I'd liken to an ETF. So again, it's Tetragard. Check it out. This is a no-brainer to invest in, especially what's going on in this world.